Aanika's Elephants is a stage show featuring puppetry that is about a young Kenyan girl who meets a baby elephant at the orphanage where her father works. The show was written by Emmy Award winning Sesame Street writer Annie Evans and directed by Sesame Street and Muppets puppeteer Pam Arciero. Annie and Pam also produced the show along with Jean Marie Keevins, who puppeteers in the production as well. I sat down with Annie, Pam, and Jean Marie for a discussion about the show and its development. During our discussion, we were also briefly joined by Sesame Street puppeteer Marty Robinson, who built the puppets for Aanika's Elephants, making this an all hands on deck episode of Under the Puppet.
You're listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show. Welcome to the show that is preserving puppetry through the personal stories of professional puppeteers. My name is Grant Pachoco, and this is Under the Puppet.
Well, it is my pleasure to welcome to Under the Puppet the sort of production team, the heart behind the show, Aanika's Elephants. I have director Pam Arciero, Annie Evans, the writer and producer and puppeteer, Jean Marie Keevins. Welcome to Under the Puppet.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to be here.
Very excited to talk to all of you. I wanted to start with, I don't know if this is necessarily where the idea began, but I'm going to start here. Annie, can you give us a short idea, sort of the back cover book synopsis of what Aanika's Elephants is about?
Do you want me to talk about where it came from, my idea for writing the play, or what the show is about?
Both would be awesome. Yeah,
because that idea for writing the play came from when I had gone to Kenya to study elephants on an Earthwatch trip, and I got very, very interested in them. Always loved elephants, but then for years and years, I was like, how do I put it into a play? And then when COVID hit, that I, as everyone did, had an open-ended amount of time to do stuff. So that's when I started to try to tackle the idea of a play. And I was actually, before that, I had been in a yoga class, and it just sort of came to me, this idea of an orphan girl and an orphan elephant. So I ran with that and then sort of just started building the story from there. And it was sort of done right after COVID we were sort of lifted, and able to come out, and give it to Pam to read. And so that was kind of how this play started. The play is about a young girl and an orphan elephant who she has to flee from a domestic situation, and she goes out into the bush and then this orphan elephant comes with her, and it's sort of their sort of struggles to survive out there. And it's a family show about conservation and love of family, love of animals.
And when you were writing, did you just let the story flow, or were there any sort of considerations that you had to bring this to stage? Because when you're talking elephants are pretty big. So did you have ideas from the beginning of how this could be staged?
I'm lucky enough to be married to a puppeteer. So as I was writing it, we discussed it, and we always visualized. Marty, I've originally, when I first wrote the first draft, had the ancillary humans, her father, and there's a woman who runs the orphanage, as Bon Raku puppets, tabletop. And then we came up with the idea of, just having it be hats and things that are even more simple and allowing for kids' imaginations. I always knew we would have some big puppets on stage, and we just always had to, think about the best way to do it. And, Marty came up with all his sort of brilliant ideas of it being natural materials. And then Pam came in, and Jean Marie came in. We all sort of, everyone started kind of finding the best way to have the show be simple and in terms of the puppetry, but also sort of things kids hadn't seen before. So it was a great journey. I think it was very collaborative after that. But I never imagined them being like realistic elephants ever. Yeah.
Right. Pam, when you got the script from Annie, what did you think about it when you first read through it?
Well, it was such a great script. And honestly, the first time I read it, I cried, and I thought, oh, this is pretty interesting. Can we do a kids' puppet show that brings that much emotion, sort of automatically to the audience without any puppet, without any actor, but just literally the words were so moving. And so then we started thinking about ways to make this happen. And originally I wanted a giant herd of elephants. I thought we'd do big shadow screens behind and, projections and all of that. And then when we started to look at what Marty was building, they were just beautiful. They're like line drawings of what you think an elephant should be, or line drawings of a herd. They're just wisps and images. And as we worked with them more, so much of it was about having great actors and minimal puppets to tell the story, and the empty space becoming your imagination and filling it in. It was just really exciting to develop it along those lines all the way through.
We had one child whose parents come to us, and he had said that I could see it all. I could see the whole elephant. He was very clearly, using his brain to do all the creative work for himself. It was very touching to know that it really worked.
Excellent. And I just want to say for anyone listening, the Marty that keeps being referenced is Marty Robinson. So just in case anyone's like, they keep saying Marty, who's Marty? But Jean Marie, how did you get involved in Aanika's Elephants?
At the beginning, Annie had sent me the script. She knew that we both have a shared love of elephants. And she said, I'd love for you to read this. And when she did, I was actually working on a play also about elephants. And I was like, oh, Annie, I'm not, I want to support you, but I'm not sure. And I opened it up. And to be honest with you, both of us, the main character had the exact same name. And I closed the script. And I thought, this is not the right timing. I don't want to do that, right, to either of our projects. But my project had been COVIDed, and we had just been picked up in Atlanta when COVID hit. And so now what? And I was with Pam at the O'Neill, and I said, it's killing me. I want to read this script so badly, but and she said, no, I think you should read the script. And then I did. And I said, oh my God, I want to be in this. And Pam was like, wait, what? So then she and Annie spoke, and they came back to me and invited me to come on as a performer, which I'm glad that we happened to be sitting next to each other. Like, what are the chances that that's going to happen when you're reading a script? And so they invited me to come on as a performer, and that was awesome. It's been a while since I've been on a stage, and so that felt really good. And of course, my marketing brain the entire time was on high. So while we were doing this workshop, it was the second development. So I was not in at the beginning. And just to be clear, we're all producers. So Pam and Annie were producing it. I'm the third stooge to join the tribe here. At that point, I was like, can we please just start taking pictures and videoing? Because I think we're going to leave here with a product. And somehow in 7 days, that says a lot, I think, to Pam's directing, Annie's writing, Martin's designs, Paul Rudolph's music. I mean, everything was already there at the end of one workshop. So I came on as a producer, and we've been running ever since.
Running is the right word.
Yeah, the first incarnation was really a proof of concept of us trying to figure out how things were going. It was like 3 people, and I was actually one of the performers in that first workshop.
Yeah, we did that. That was very COVID. We just had the lead, Jamaica here. They came. We made a little theater in our basement, and we shot like the first scene because we needed some video for the Henson Foundation grant. So we shot that video here, and it was just, and even then we knew, wow, this is great. We actually had Bradley Freeman, who was in Texas. We had him actually on a Zoom, and we had him working and doing the lines, and Marty was doing the puppet like this, with the camera, and it was crazy. But and we knew that wasn't how it would work for the theater, but we had to do something because we were all stuck where we were, And but and we got the Henson workshop grant from that. So that's how we first started then doing the workshop that Jean Marie joined was at the Ridgefield Theater Barn up here in Connecticut. And so that was we were very lucky to have this beautiful little barn space to really just work on it. So.
Can you talk a little bit about that process? Like, what was it at the start of the week to the end of the week when you left the barn with the elephants? Let the elephants out of the barn, I guess.
Well, Jamaica Collins, who is our lead Aanika, has a ton of script. She is the heart of the show. She runs the show. So what we came in with was Jamaica was basically memorized, which was a super gift for us because, I mean, we're talking what is it, Annie? 30 pages, basically.
Has almost all the dialogue. I mean, she's never not on stage and then never not driving the action.
But what we had was some of the puppets, Marty was still building and developing things, and we had the cast and crew there. And basically, we started with just kind of figuring out what we could do on the stage, how we were going to make the set work. We had a lot more set pieces. We had some puppets that hadn't since been retired from the show because they didn't work. And so every day we would go in and add a little bit more, which is how I like to direct. I'm very linear in my directing. I don't want to, it's not like television for me or film where you direct out of sequence, because I think it's harder for the performers to keep in mind where we're going. I want them to know every day at the end of today, we're going to be at the end of this page. I want you memorized if you can be. When we get there, let's do it. And then we'll work the movement. We worked everything day by day. And actually, we were bringing the musicians in. We brought them in like Friday, right?
Yeah, only like 2 days before.
Yeah, we brought them in like Thursday, and I think we were having Saturday and Sunday shows. So we were just sharing it with our family members, basically.
It was an invited audience only, which in the long run we probably could have charged, but we didn't know what we were going to have.
We didn't know what we have. How can you ask someone to pay, when you have no idea?
Yeah.
So it was an invited audience, and by Thursday, when the musicians walked in, we were almost ready. So then Friday just became a full dress rehearsal day, and by Saturday we rehearsed it in the morning. We ran the show in the afternoon, and the audiences loved it, and I did too. It's like, it's pretty wonderful when you direct a show, and at the end of the first time it shows, you're actually weeping. I mean, I was tearing up because it was so beautiful, and so it just was coming together so great. But I'm a crybaby, so go figure.
Also, Paul prepared too. He was sending us sounds and sending us like, what about this? What about that beforehand? So he came in prepared. So, yeah. But it was really like adding the final piece, adding the music, because as soon as the music was there, it's like when you add a soundtrack to a movie, it just added this whole other element, because he had a lot of sound effects, drums, scene change music, things to help the flow of the show, and it just took it that next level up.
That's Paul Rudolph, in case anybody's wondering.
Also, now correct me, girls, if I'm wrong. That was also very unique about that this experience was very much a play, a developmental play experience, where for my many years of working with puppeteers in the O'Neill, often it's the puppet gets built, and then the script comes second. There's where this for the cast and everyone, it was really a traditional theater experience where our script was first. We did readings, we developed the script, so it followed that trajectory, which I think was also really great for our cast too, because not all of them come out of a traditional play experience. Jamaica does, but so I think that was a really great thing for the cast themselves.
Yeah, and that is a really important point to me, that very often we build a puppet and then we say, now what do I do with this? And this was more traditional thing. We have a piece. How do we build a puppet for it? It is a very different approach from the way many puppeteers go. Most of us are builders, and most of us fall in love with what we've built. And then once we've built this beautiful puppet, we go, well, now what do we do with it? And that's a very different way to tell a story, right? Because you're just telling a story about the object as opposed to the story that's been presented to you. So it is a different way of approaching how you develop a puppet show, basically.
Well, and can you talk a little bit about assembling the team, this production team of Marty and Paul and Andre C. Allen, right, who did the lights as well? Can you talk a little bit about getting that team together to get this up?
I think I came on again late to that, right? You guys had already invited.
Yeah, the cast was already pretty much set. But we just invited our friends, you know what I mean? But we're very lucky that it just happened to coincide that Sesame Street was really doing outreach to bring in people of color into the show and performers. And Marty had been training for like 2 years. Like Jamaica was one of his students. And when I was writing the play, he would say, this is really good. And she's really good. You got to watch her, and then I met her and we would talk. So by the time we were actually looking to cast, we kind of already had in our head who we would most likely ask to do it. It was very, very important to us to have an African-American cast, mostly, it is set in Africa. And so we were paying attention to that. So we just offered people who we loved to come. And then also, in terms of the three producers, that it was Pam and I for the workshop. Then as soon as the workshop was over, we started to, and the word of mouth kind of went boom. And suddenly we have an invite from Atlanta, and we were going to go down, to Tryon, North Carolina, to do it down there as a full. That was our first full like big show, was down in Tryon, North Carolina, and that just to another level. And that's when Andre Allen came on. Jean Marie found Andre, and he was based out of Atlanta, because we knew we were going to go to the puppetry centers. So, but it was a lot of just fate as we moved along. The people sort of fell into into place in front of us, who were the right fit for their show. Also, that first workshop, we also housed everybody in our own houses. It was very, so we weren't going to ask people, that we didn't feel comfortable with in our houses and stuff. We cooked, we had food, delivered to the theater. It was a very, we have a barn, let's put up a show kind of a thing. Yeah, which was very different than by the time basically a year later, then we went to Tryon, North Carolina, and then basically the town produced it, because they housed all of us in their homes. And then we had a caterer who came every day and brought food, and it was astonishing how this town came together to produce this show. It was something else. And Andre Allen, the lighting designer, said that we can't even look at that as like a normal theater experience, because we're never going to get that again. We had to know that we're never going to have people come together like that to help us get this, because then it was really fully produced. The lights were just dynamic, and so we were again kind of blessed with that. And then we went down to a real theater in Atlanta.
So I just want to make sure that we acknowledge a couple of people in that process. So along the way, we picked up Monet Morris. She was our stage manager right at the beginning in Ridgefield, and she came with us and is still with the show. As the show grows and changes, we know that our team will continue to grow and change. But everybody who's come along has been super invested on how they can stay into the show. So Jessica, who joined us initially, was building with Marty and was one of the performers, but she's not a performer. And so she was like, well, I do want to come in and teach the next person my track, right? So everybody is kind of like shepherding the show along. Monet came with us in Atlanta for 2 days to teach the stage manager in Atlanta, right? Everybody who's been involved from the beginning has really been invested in the show. And then Andre came along, and it was very important to us that the lighting designer who came onto the show be a person of color. And we really wanted somebody out of Atlanta, because we knew that we would likely go to the center. The Tryon Fine Arts Center was amazing in getting us up and going. The Puppeteers of America were our next event. And so that taught us how to move the show, right? We went from one location to another. They were wildly different events, right? In Tryon, we were like the Broadway show comes to Tryon. And then at the Puppeteers of America event, we were pipe and drape. Right. So we had to learn how to do the show in all the ways. So there was a lot of learning going on at that point. And we knew the Center for Puppetry Arts was coming. And now we've been growing our bench, and we'll continue to grow our bench, so that as the show grows and tours, we can take these people with us. And Andre, unfortunately, had a very debilitating stroke and hasn't been able to continue with us. However, Montana Kern, who is his ALD, and Tryon, has now picked up and ran with the show with Andre's blessing. So, we have this really, really strong and growing team. And I really think that has everything to do, quite frankly, with the script. You read the script at the beginning and you're like, I'm in. And every single person who's read it says, I'm in. And Andre says at the first meeting with our crazy little group, he was like, okay, well, also you're all insane and I'm in. Because you seem fun. So yeah, it's a fun and dedicated group, but we all are very mission oriented, and everybody has been in film and TV for so long, and they all have roots in theater. Yeah. So everyone's so happy to be back in a theater again that it's just been magic.
Excellent. I wanted to talk, we touched on this a little bit at the very start, but I just want to make sure I give it its proper feature in this interview. And that is the puppets and the way things are presented on stage. One of the really intriguing things to me are the way the other sort of humans or people around Aanika are presented. It's just fun to have these bodiless, but they're, the kind of thing that I can compare it to is sort of like the Invisible Man, kind of that kind of look. But can you talk a little bit about the development of that style?
That's kind of my deal, slightly. I was just passing by and I thought, sounds like a me question.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, when the whole design process had to do with it being a memory play, and I was thinking about, what do you remember about things? You remember smells, you remember attitudes, you remember, this memory is a funny thing, and I wanted to kind of extrapolate on Aanika's memories and what would she most remember about, for instance, her father or Mrs. Mutembe. And it's the deep, rich voice, and it's the love, and it's the connection. And then, how do you present that in the simplest way? And I thought of all kinds of things. For a while, I had hats. I don't know if you remember, Pam, that it was a hat that would then talk. It was a flexible hat that would talk.
Yeah, not
then
good.
turn back into a hat. There were hats, with gloves, and the gloves would talk and do things like in Labyrinth and and all that kind of stuff. And it was a little precious and a little puppety. And I went back. Part of my whole design process or of my entire life is what's the simplest possible way of presenting an idea, because I love to get lost in the complexity. So it became hats with rich voices and attitudes and focus and presence. You're able to with a hat that's in the air, you can create the symbolic reference of a human being. And you're really engaging the audience in fleshing it out and finishing it up, and and being part of the whole design process. It was really easy, for instance, to make Aanika a small girl by making the characters around her so much taller, and all of a sudden, poof, she's smaller and she's looking up to them.
And it became really clear almost instantly that Aanika would be the only human, right? She's the only physical human on the set. She's the one whose memory we're looking into. So when she switches, and I just love it. I just think of this fine line drawings come out of her memories of what happened here and there in terms of the elephants. It really, it's just been an amazing process with Marty to say, I think this hat is too much, or this, do you think this matches? And we went through incarnations of because Marty also did the sets, right? Of, does this tree look too gnarly? Does it read as a tree? Does it read as a bush? It's got too many poison berries. Kids are scared, so we went through a whole lot of design ideas together. And it's really been so collaborative in terms of how the puppets work. And I recently got probably the best compliment I've received, and this goes for Marty too, which was someone said, I saw your show and all I could think of was the empty space and how you've done what Peter Brooks says theater should be. And I was so touched by that. It still gives me goosebumps to hear that you took the empty space and you filled it with almost nothing, but have a whole story, right? That's the goal. Puppetry, we're about telling stories with objects and things and not crapping it up too much with a lot of junk, right? You just want to be able to get right to the story with the object that you're using to tell the clearest story you can in the most minimal way. And I think that's what we've succeeded in.
And to both Marty and Pam's credit, they're also very collaborative with the performers, right? You can go over to Marty at any time and be like, I have an idea, and he wants to hear it all, right? He wants to make it better. He wants to offer you a new suggestion. And with Pam, you just can start to play a space while everybody's looking over there, and she'll either add to it or ask you why you're doing it and pull more from it. You don't need much more than that, particularly with this group. The whole group just feels each other on stage all the time.
Really, yeah, it's an absolutely brilliant, incredibly talented group. So, and the way that they have brought these very just simple, sketches of elephant faces to life, and to the point where they've got the weight and the gravitas, and you can feel the weight when they walk, and even though there's no legs, you can feel the ponderous heavy steps and the plus all the the excitement and the interest, and I just love what they're getting out of them.
As a matter of fact, at one point there was an elephant butt, which those of us who were in the first class, we miss it very much. And
Just
we've
the
talked
butt.
about, yeah, we might auction it. I don't know.
It's
I keep
moldering. It's moldering out in my driveway right now.
No, don't put in the
meant
drive.
to be a wall hanging. It is. It's awesome. But every so often you'll hear one of the performers like whisper to the other one, like, you hit me with your tail, right? There's no tails on stage, like, but we can start to see each other. And I think that says a lot to the design and the direction, that you can feel the world when you're in it. And so you know that the audience is with you. There's no question.
And I've worked enough problematic puppets built by other puppeteers in my life to know a design that doesn't work well with human beings and the way their hands work and the way their minds work. So I'm very tuned, being a builder and a performer, I'm very tuned in to the safety, the ease of workmanship, the ergonomic interaction between the puppeteer and the object. And anytime any puppeteer has, I need a better handle here, I need a handle here, I get that in as soon as I can.
Can you, Marty, since you're here, talk to us about that big elephant head? Like, how is that puppeteered? Like, how many puppeteers are on there? How is it held? Is it a backpack? How does that work?
No, yeah, I've done backpack things before. I've done big, monstrously heavy things. I as I say, I get lost in complicated mechanisms. I love my mechs. But as Tim Lagasse, my dear friend, always asks me, what do you need this for? What's the purpose of this? I built a puppet for my first show I ever did. It took me 5 weeks to make this crystal spider, which with LED lights and and a beating heart and and then I showed it to Annie and said, and she was helping me with the story, and she said, well, where does this fit in the story? I said, where it fits in with the story is it took me 5 weeks to make it. That's where it fits in. And it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever made. It ended up, it's just hanging from the wall of my office because it was a thing of beauty, but useless story-wise. What was the question?
Well, like for this big elephant head, how is it manipulated? How is it puppeteered?
As simple as can be. It's it's not that I'm comparing myself to Picasso at all, but I drew lots of inspiration from Picasso. He drew a bull with a flashlight and a time lapse thing. It's one of my favorite little funny pieces of art, where it's time lapse. He drew a bull in space with a flashlight, and then he's there at the end with holding the flashlight, and you can see the bull that he drew in space, and it's just a thing of absolute beauty and spontaneity. And I kind of wanted to do that with these. So they're just simple whorls of rattan. You hold it actually at the outside, up over your head, depending on how tall the thing is. And then you work basically the ears by rotating your wrists. There's a place you can hold it in the center. The ears will kind of work on their own at that point. And then you can reach down and work the trunk with a simple rod. It's just as simple as can be, and they're fairly light, even though they have all the appearance of massiveness. There's really nothing to them. And one of the conceit of the show was that they all be made out of natural materials. So it's all rattan, bamboo, and twine and rope, basically. We don't talk about the zip ties, but I keep them all covered up.
Every once in a while, I need a little zip tie to keep things together.
Zip ties are so fast and so dependable.
But they are fairly light and easy to work, and that enables us to have a herd of elephants with minimal number of puppeteers. And we keep trying to make it minimal number of puppeteers, because as most of you know who do touring shows, the more people you tour, the more expensive the show, the less likely you're going to get booked. In this country in particular, in Europe, there's lots of shows that have giant casts, but they have different kinds of funding than we have in this country. So it's much harder to tour a big show here.
Well,
That's
and I got a little sneak preview before we started recording here. All of you were kind of getting together talking about how everything needs to fit into certain suitcases so you can travel. So, can you talk a little bit about the challenges of getting things to fit in a suitcase to go tour?
getting them into suitcases. That was always, is my goal, having toured puppet shows as a young person. That was my first 5 years of puppetry, was touring all over the place. The realization that I wanted to make sure that as we move forward, we were able to get them into suitcases, that they were light enough that we could all handle it. And the idea being that if we had 7 people, get each person a suitcase and get their puppets in there. They're responsible for it, which has kind of worked. But that onus became put on Marty, basically, because he was the builder and he had to figure that part out.
And Annie, because Annie's the one who finds the cases,
Oh.
who took all the measures,
That's an Annie question.
called all the airlines to find out where.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just producing. That's producing 101. You make phone calls, you do research, you see which is the most expensive way, you find out which airlines, has the highest amount of capacity for, and you call U-Haul and see which is, that's all, I would say that's a different brain. And I find, which is why I'm sort of starting a new play. So I'm having to like disengage myself from some of the production ends of Aanika, because I find that that kind of brain, the producing brain, is easier for me, and so I will defer to that. So it's like, oh, well, I've got to make these phone calls about airplane rides, and my big thing lately being unemployment insurance and things like that, and workman's comp. So that because that is a certain kind of a brain, and then the creative brain for me, I have to really focus and kind of keep things away while I work, and be a little bit more in a cave to get things done, which is why I think Aanika worked out so well, because we really were in a cave. It was COVID. So we were, I would come down here and there was nobody coming over. There was nobody here except me, Marty, and the kids for like 4 months or 3 months. So that was a real creative opportunity for, I think, the whole world in some ways,
Excellent. I would love to ask, and maybe Annie, you can answer this. When you you took the show to the New Victory Theater in spring of 2024, one of the things that you offered was sensory-friendly performances.
I did that with the New Victory. I'm going to tell you, they offer it, but to me, that's really important with children's audiences, and it is a common option. So we knew going into New Vic that was an option. We knew that we would not try it in Tryon, but that we would try it in the Center for Puppetry Arts. What would that look like? So in the Center for Puppetry Arts, we did have a performance where they pulled back the audio and they had a little bit more light, not a lot. But then when we went to New Vic, because they have such a strong program for sensory-friendly audiences, and they have such a strong, both centers have a very strong educational program, we knew we could leave New Vic, because they gave us the option. We knew we could leave New Vic with a clear understanding of how to perform the show for sensory-friendly audiences, and a clear understanding of how to prepare and share educational materials, because wherever we go next, we want the options, right? And the show is about getting to as many people as possible. So for us, the sensory friendly, I know it's hard for some audience members, but for the cast, the sensory friendly performance was the second favorite performance of all the performances we've done. That was just such a pleasure. Such a pleasure. Those kids were in, and we could see them. We don't usually get to see them. So to be able to see the kids,
the house lights were on. Yeah, right.
It's so fun to be able to watch them losing their minds and like play to that part of the audience, other than, just trying to listen and guess. There's a kid that we still quote. If something doesn't feel good on stage, we all quote this kid, which was, it was a school audience, and this kid stood up. First, we heard him during the shout. That's that uncle. Watch out. It's going to be, no, you don't want to do that. And we were like rolling, because we knew exactly where he was, by the time. Then we were like, when we go into the audience, we were finding him. It was just the best. But at the end of the show, this kid stood up and all of us ran to the same wing to be able to watch because we wanted to see how he was going to leave. And he stood up and he looks around the room and he takes this righteous pose like Aanika does at the end of the show. And he goes, "That was a good show." And then he looked at this little girl next to him and she was much younger. He goes, "You don't know that that was a good show, but that was a good show." And then he looks around the rest of the room and they started to applaud again.
Oh.
It was the best. Like having that kid, we were like, I don't care what any other review comes in. So now whenever anybody has like a rough moment, we're like, don't you worry, that was a good show.
Well, Pam, I want to ask, and maybe you can lead this answer. Has the show, after these runs, after In the Barn and then North Carolina and the Center for Puppetry Arts and the Puppetry Festival and then the New Victory, has the show evolved at all after these performances? Has there been changes to the show?
Not major ones, little minor technical things that have improved the way the show is being told. But overall, it kind of gelled and it's just gone forward that way, which is shocking to me because I would have thought there would be places for it to change and grow. It changes and grows with the audience and as the performers get better at what they're doing. But the overall arc of the show and the overall meaning and commitment to the show has not changed. It's really quite astonishing to me that it's so little has changed about it.
Yeah, the script that came out of Ridgefield is the script, because we did it. I mean, the script, the first and second drafts before I did anything, I gave it out to my beloved editors, people who always help me with writing. And there was some big changes then, because it was too long. And she was my one friend I really trust. She said it's too dark. You got to put some more humor in it because I'm very humorous based in when I write. And but it was COVID, so so I'm not putting in this dark stuff. So I went through and I pulled out a lot of things that were too much, and then we found she suggested this. There's a motif through the whole play about her mother being the storyteller, and she has a book that she carries with her. And I had brought the book in the beginning, but I kind of forgot about the book, And then she says, no, this has to go through the whole thing. He has to have this motif of the mother as the storyteller, and then she takes over that role. So there's things that I found, just in this pure playwriting phase. But then once we found what and then when we were doing Ridgefield, I think we definitely cut some things. We don't need this, and stuff like that. But then once the script came out of there, then it was more tweaking, and then the cast being who they are, and they all work on Sesame stuff. They're very good improvers. So there's things that got developed and deepened. There was a whole scene between Jamaica and the dad when he's feeding her a termite that started out with like one line, and now it's like 10 lines about her trying to get him to eat the and here comes a little termite, and I just wrote those into the script because it was a moment of levity, a very familiar moment to parents and kids, and they have so much fun, sort of jamming on it, depending on the audience and what's happening, that it's become a much more bigger event. There's also, when we went to a bigger space, the walk around through the audience took a lot longer because every kid wants to be able to reach out and touch with the elephants, but so then you got Jamaica, Aanika, and the little on stage, so they had to develop their own scene on stage to keep them going, that Pam helped them with, while all the other people are screaming out in the audience because there's big elephants out there. So there's those kinds of things that happened, which is a natural progression of as the show grows and fills in, but the actual lines of dialogue are very, very similar to the original workshop.
I wanted to add that our lighting director at the Ridgefield Playhouse was integral as well. He really set up the format.
Yes, he was amazing. Very helpful.
Amazing. And for all intents and purposes, we might have brought him along, except that we wanted to add more. We wanted more people of color in both the production and the cast. That's very important to us. This is an African story. We wanted to have the feel of Africa, the feel of African Americans in this story with us. That was really important for us.
And we wanted someone from Atlanta.
Yeah, we did want an Atlanta-based lighting director for sure.
We knew that was the first time we were really going to be able to blow out the show, right, and go for it. And so Atlanta was a big Center for Puppetry Arts came on as a partner for the show at that time. And really brought resources and helped us grow. And so having someone in Atlanta was really key. And Andre at the time had a studio. So he kept saying, don't you worry, I'm going to back up a truck. There's going to be so many lights in that place. You're going to be telling me to turn them out. Like he went for it, and it paid off because he was basically doing the test run for the new Vic.
Well, as we start to wind down here, I would love to ask from all of you, what do you see as the future of the show? Where do you see the show going, and what's going to happen with it in the years to come?
Well, my untrue story is that I would like to have a behind the music of what happens on the show behind the show, because we are having a great time behind the show. But no, nobody's wants to produce that. But we are going to be at the Chicago International Puppetry Festival. Spoiler alert. Praying
January.
that their announcement comes out before this podcast in January. So we're looking forward to that. We're playing at the DeSable Center on the south side of Chicago. So we are looking forward to that. And then right now we're talking with venues on the West Coast as well as in Europe. And we've been booked for the Fuse Festival in Kingston, UK, but let the fundraising begin. Because how are we doing this European tour? We have a lot of interest in Europe, but getting there is its own journey.
Right. So I think we will continue to try and book the show continually. I don't want the show to go to sleep. I do want it to continue in any way we can make it happen. So we're going to keep looking for avenues for funding, for avenues for moving it forward. We'd like to work with, I'm thinking zoos, right? You've got a zoo that has a great elephant thing. Why wouldn't they want us to come and do a special summer zoo program for, a few days doing the show there? Because a lot of zoos do have auditorium, theater situations that they could put us in. So we're looking for different venues that might take us, as well as working with hopefully wildlife organizations that might have some funding to get the education out, because there is an educational aspect to this, right? We're talking about how to save elephant environments, to make sure that they have spaces to go, and what the poachers are doing to the elephants and why it's so bad. So we do have educational value for the wildlife federations that might want to get the message out there. So we'll continue to look for avenues like that. But if anybody has an idea or a deep pocket, we're happy to hear it.
Yeah, I was going to say turning this into like a direct call for action. So thank you for doing that, because I always say the show should have a request for proposal attached, because we have gotten the University of Hawaii and other schools have reached out to us saying, how do we make this happen? So, if that means, Pam and leasing puppets to somebody or anything, we want to have that conversation. And if people haven't already seen it yet, the Great Migration, which is currently happening in New York and then going to Miami, and then it's going somewhere in the West, Montana maybe. It's a beautiful installation of puppets that we were invited to be a part of. And Pam and I were there for their opening blessing, and we got to meet some of their matriarchs, which are funders from different world wildlife organizations. And, Annie's been working with organizations since the beginning. And we just teamed up with Sheldrick, the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust, to come in and support our show. So, we are looking for partners of any shape or size, just like Pam said, and we don't want people to hesitate to reach out to us. So it does not have to be the show as it currently exists, but even if you're only looking for the script, the story should be told.
Excellent. I want to ask right at the very end here, if there are sort of puppeteers or performers out there who would like to create a show like this on their own, what advice do you have for them? Because I always see this podcast as something that puppeteers can listen to and kind of get a little advice from. So what would you say for putting on a show like this?
Smaller cast.
But that's for America. You know what I mean? It's like the advice is to dream big and do the show you want to do, and then figure out the other side of it when you have to. This show I need my 7 people on that stage.
Oh, you can't cut it. There's no question. That's
cannot cut it any further down. It would not be the same show. It's not a show that can be done. And I don't think you want to do it as a tiny show, because there's a possibility we could have done it as hand puppets, right? And Aanika would be a little Boon Raku puppet. We did talk about that at one point a little bit, about bringing it to a smaller, tourable size. But that's not the vision. That's not what sells this show. So I think you get the idea, you get the script, you figure out the puppets, and you do the show that you want to do. And maybe you only get to do it once, or maybe you only get to do it for a week. But follow that dream and then see where that comes from. Where does that go? What's the next steps? It will be presented to you as when you take that leap of faith, then things come back to you and help you do it. I think that's really important for us and how we've done this.
And I want to note something about that as somebody who, coaches a lot of young puppeteers, right? And more mature puppeteers, but young puppeteers who ask me all the time, what's it like to work with them? And they're talking about Pam and Annie and Marty. And, I've had a very privileged career where I have worked with people at the top, but consider that those same people are just being scrappy. Right? They built this in the basement and wrote it during COVID and fed everybody. And we made our own breakfasts, right? And we slept in the houses. And if they hadn't had houses, we would have been sleeping on floors because we were still going to make art, right? So it doesn't matter where you are or what your paycheck is. If you really, really, really want to make a piece, then make the piece. But if you really, really want to make a commercial piece, that's a different conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. But go make the thing. And that's what this show is. And we happen to have the team who know how to take the scrappy piece of art and make it a commercial piece. But this show would have happened no matter what. Go make your art.
Yeah, it was. Look, Marty and I have great careers. We love our job. We love being on Sesame Street. There is no doubt that is one of the most fulfilling things that we do. But there's a whole other side of us that doesn't get filled by that commercial side. And so for us, this really was, how do we get this other side of us to grow, to blossom, to do something with, And it's a real delight to push that dream, to figure out that piece of art you want to make. And that's what you have to do.
Yeah. And also there's a big difference in doing that and because when you're doing a commercial TV show, you do what you're told. It's the script is written, and if they want to rewrite it, they rewrite it. It's I have no control over that. Yeah. The great thing about theater is we have total control. Yeah, and as a playwright, what's one of the great things about being a playwright is that the sort of status quo of playwriting is everything has to be approved by the playwright. In TV and film, nothing has to be approved by the writer, because you're being paid. You're getting a fee. You do your script, and then it's owned by the company that paid you. Whether you retain your rights as a playwright. So there's something so much more satisfying to know that you as a writer that your words and your work is being respected, and it's what's on stage is what you wanted to have on stage. So there's nothing up there that Pam and I and Jean Marie and Marty didn't come to sometimes to compromises about, but it isn't. We all are content with what we see on stage.
It's a great show. We love the show. Someone asked me, they said, directors don't come to every show on Broadway usually. When we were at the New Vic, and I said, why wouldn't I come to every show? I love this show. And so I was there. Whether my performers like that or not, I don't know. But
you were really good about not giving very many notes as the run went on. You were very
no, that's not my job anymore. My job is just make sure the story's being told. And if performers have little tweaks and needs that they understand, because I'm not holding that puppet on stage. I know they're dealing with much more stuff that I don't get. So I trust them to make the right choice for the picture.
Well, Pam Arciero, Annie Evans, and Jean Marie Keevins, thank you so much for taking the time to be on Under the Puppet today. I will have links to where people can find out more about the show and donate in the show notes for this episode. But just thank you to all three of you and Marty too, for the run-in as well, for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Many thanks to Annie Evans, Pam Arciero, Jean Marie Keevins, and Marty Robinson for being on the show to discuss Aanika's elephants. For links to some of the things we talked about, check out the show notes for this episode number 101, over at underthepuppet.com. I would like to send a special thank you out to all the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who help make the show possible. Patreon patrons at the producer level and above who get a special shout out are Eve Cunning, Kathy Crawford, Tony Urbano, Brandy, David Akers, Paul, Scott Armstrong, Vicky Sebring, Ricky Chavez, Karina, Jeff Toro, and Lee Thompson. To become a patron, visit patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media. And thank you for your support. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Under the Puppet. If you have questions, suggestions, or feedback about the show, send them via email to underthepuppet@gmail.com. Or you can connect with the show on Instagram or Facebook by searching for Under the Puppet. And don't forget to tell a friend about the show. This episode featured music by Dan Ring and was edited by Steven Staver. Thank you so much for listening. Under the Puppet is copyright 2024 Saturday Morning Media Grant Bachoco executive producer, all rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com.
Under the Puppet proudly presents The Adventures of Timmy the Tooth Reunion. In this almost 90-minute video, you will hear great stories from the cast and crew who brought this amazing puppet show to life. Plus, you'll see never-before-seen artwork and exclusive behind-the-scenes video. Under the Puppet's Timmy the Tooth Reunion is available right now at timmy.underthepuppet.com.
You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.